Our start back, we're talking FF7, we're talking Rebirth, and we found out the Ultimania for Rebirth. We knew this was coming out on April 12th in Japan, which is why I wanted to get my video out yesterday, kind of give my thoughts on the ending of Rebirth. Just wanted to kind of like briefly touch on what I think is kind of happening with some aspects of the ending before we get maybe some answers from the Ultimania. As per usual, I don't know what all info is out there just because people have been doing translations like kind of all night, like since like pretty early this morning for me. Just kind of all day long, we have like Shinra Archaeology Department, we have Audrey, of course, and then I think maybe Genki's doing some translations potentially. I don't know. So I don't know what all's out there. I know that there is some things to talk about. Which, since I did mention Audrey, we got to put this out there. We might look at some of her translations today. I don't entirely know. It depends on what's on her Twitter. She does have like different translations than other people out there. And I know Japanese is kind of like a hard language to translate to English, but she just has like a history, relatively recent, last couple of years or so, being like wrong somewhat often. And sometimes she's like, her interpretation, her translations are like drastically wrong at times, where it completely changes the context of what's being said at times. So just got to keep that in mind as we go forward. So we're going to hop right into this with Shinra Archaeology Department. They say the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Ultimania includes a section dealing with the game's key points and newly arisen mysteries. It spans 4 pages in all. This is the first dealing with the world's division and plurality, as well as the white materia. While many of the mysteries left in Final Fantasy VII Remake's wake have now been solved in Rebirth, that's a little bit debatable, the section reflects back on some of the story's crucial components. Key stories, points, new mysteries, worlds plural, and divided entity. At the end of the previous game, Zack routs the Shinra troops who've surrounded him and lives to see another day. This differs from what we saw in the original Final Fantasy VII. However, it's now clear that these events took place in a different world from the one that Cloud and his teammates inhabit. What's more, Sephiroth reveals to us toward the end of the story that several worlds exist within the planet where the game takes place. We can distinguish these worlds based on how Loyal Little Stamp appears in each of them. At least 5 of these worlds appear throughout the course of the game. Sephiroth seems to be intimately familiar with the structure of these worlds and is apparently using them as a means to prolong the planet's life. So right there, I don't think there's anything necessarily worth discussing, as in, like, we already knew that there's the multiple world stuff. We talked about this yesterday. I mean, it's literally told to us and showed to us by Sephiroth, and we see it ourselves towards the end of the game, right? So we already know that there's the multiple world shit. It's a matter of the context of that, like the worlds inside the planet. What does that mean exactly? Are these like actual worlds, again, that have existed for a long, long time? You know, thousands of years, millions of years, billions of years? Are they something that's like newly created, something along those lines, right? Are they actual real worlds? Or is it all just like people in the live stream that just don't realize that they're dead or whatever, or recreations of people that have existed before? A lot of questions there, right? But the idea of there being like 5 worlds, there's something interesting here, because we see this, I think, through multiple different translations I've seen on Twitter. There's a possibility of 6 worlds, right? Because we've seen 5 different stamps. We've seen the Terrier, the Beagle, the Pug, the Pomeranian. It's also translated as like a Chihuahua. I've also seen the Border Collie, so I don't know what the fucking black and white dog is exactly. And then there's like the Shiba, which I think Shinra Arc has labeled as something else as well. Corgi, I think it is. Choose Shinra Archaeology Department's picture here for this. But if you look at all the stamps, we can see there's stars, all except the Johnny one, the Shiba, the Corgi, whatever the fuck it is. The black and white dog, it has 3 stars. The Terrier stamp has 4. The Beagle stamp has 5. And the Pug has 6. So theoretically, there's probably a 1 and a 2, right? Since we're starting at 3. The lowest we have so far is 3. The one that Johnny has potentially either has 1 or 2 stars, and then there would be that 6th one, which is where the idea of there being 6 worlds comes from, I think. So continuing with the page 1 translations, meaningful lines from Sephiroth regarding the world. My dominion shall reach into infinity. It shall encompass worlds unbound by fate and histories unwritten. My fragmented mother, these errant worlds all shall be one again, all made whole forever. Chapter 13 reveals ambitions of the Temple of the Ancients. So this is where you've been hiding, in a world that has accepted its fate, just as you must, which is, this is the date, of course, that Aerith and Cloud go on. It's extra chapter, episode 7, upon sensing Aerith and Cloud's presence. When the boundaries of fate are breached, new worlds are born. The planet encompasses a multitude of worlds, ever unfolding. Some quickly perish, while others endure. Yet even the most resilient worlds are doomed to fade. Nevertheless, their loss is not to be mourned, for it is not death, but a homecoming that awaits them. And in the planet's embrace, all life is as one. Chapter 14, explain the nature of reality to Cloud. The world crossing white materia. The white materia in Aerith's possession is a countermeasure against the meteor summoned by the black materia. However, in the world Cloud and his party inhabit, the white materia has lost its power and become transparent. White materia from a different world entrusted to Cloud by Aerith in Sector 5 slums is transferred across worlds and delivered to the Aerith in Cloud and his party's world. So, like, the white materia thing is something we didn't talk about when we discussed the ending shit yesterday, but I think it's relatively self-explanatory in the game. That can be said for a lot of shit for Rebirth. I honestly, even though I don't feel like I have all the answers, because I certainly don't, I don't feel like I have like a shit ton of questions coming out of Rebirth like I did with Remake. But like the white materia things, I mean, we see it. We see the clear materia, right, that insinuates it has no power. And we see Cloud go to like a different world, like in a different Aerith, or maybe same Aerith, whatever, gives him white materia that does have power, and he brings it to the main world, right? Because even Sephiroth says that's not supposed to be there when like they're in the sleeping forest or whatever. So like again, like it's cool to see, and it's cool that they explain it a bit, but I think it's relatively self-explanatory in the game.
Where am I? That doesn't belong here.
I do want to say, though, now that we're talking about the white materia, there's kind of an interesting discussion that we could have here, because the ability to like hop to a different world, grab an object, bring it back to your world kind of adds a level of credibility to these worlds being like tangible, real worlds and not maybe just some like creation of the live stream type shit. Especially the fact that there's seems to be multiple white materials, right? We had one, but it lost its power, but we can hop to this timeline, this world, grab their white materia, bring it back to us, right? Like, it's almost like some fucking Avengers Endgame shit, right? The Infinity Stones, that type of shit, right? Speaking of Endgame, I do wonder, like, with us hopping to that world, taking their white materia, does that doom that world to be destroyed similar to Endgame, where when we take the Infinity Stones from a different timeline, like, that timeline's doomed unless we return it? So is there going to be, like, an Avengers Endgame? Is that what they're copying here? Like, we're going to have to, like, take that white materia back to that world at some point so that it doesn't get destroyed? I don't know. Say that, too, on the discussion of whether or not these other worlds are real. To use another movie example, there could be like some Nightmare on Elm Street type shit, right? Where like in those movies, like you're in the dream world, but if you grab an object, you can bring it with you into the real world. There could be something like that here, where like these aren't necessarily real worlds. It could either be created by the planet. Some people theorize that one of these worlds is created by Aerith potentially, which maybe that's what that world was, where she gave him the white materia. But maybe that's like a thing where it's like you can bring objects from these not truly real worlds into reality, potentially. I don't know. Moving on to page 2, the FF7 Rebirth Ultimania includes a section dealing with the game's key points and newly arisen mysteries. It spans 4 pages in all. This is the second, which features a table outlining the 5, possibly 6, different worlds we see throughout the game. Worlds depicted throughout the game, world type, little stamp appearance notes. The world where Cloud and his party are Beagle. The world where the game's main story takes place. In this world, Zack and Biggs have already died. The world where Zack survived, Yorkshire Terrier. The world where Zack's side of the story plays out in the extra chapters. A crack has appeared in the sky, the flowers have withered, and its inhabitants are resigned themselves to the end of their world. In this world, Kyrie hasn't left Midgar and is instead trying to become a new recruit with a reborn avalanche. Splits off due to Zack's choices. The world where Zack heads for the Shinra building, Yorkshire Terrier. War continues with the world where Zack survives. Zack tries to visit Hojo in hopes of curing Cloud, but is surrounded by a platoon of Shinra troops in the Shinra building's entrance. Splits off due to Zack's choice. The world where Zack heads to the Mach Reactor 6, Pug. Zack tries to prevent Biggs from blowing up Mach Reactor 6, but the bomb ends up being a dud. Shortly after, Shinra troops rush in and shoot Biggs dead before surrounding Zack. Splits off due to Zack's choice. The world where Zack is worrying in front of the church, Corgi, as Zack struggles to decide whether he should help Cloud stop Biggs or wait for Aerith to awaken. Sephiroth suddenly appears. In this world, Johnny hasn't left Midgar and passes by in front of Zack. Sector 5 Slums, where Cloud and Aerith go on a stroll. Chihuahua, which I don't think that fucking dog's a Chihuahua, but whatever. The world where Extra Chapter Episode 7 plays out. Its inhabitants are vaguely aware that their world will soon disappear. Zack is not present, nor is Elmira or Marlene. So obviously all the different worlds themselves, again, when it comes to the game, I think are relatively self-explanatory. I just don't know what it is going on with all the different scenes we see of Zack and all the different worlds, the different choices. Obviously, there are different choices he can make or did make. I'm just not entirely sure what that. Are we just being shown these other worlds where Zack makes these different choices just as hypotheticals? Like these are what could happen potentially, but or are we following the same Zack hopping to those worlds, making those different choices? That's what I'm not sure. That's where like I don't have the answers for that exactly. They say that whenever he's sitting on the church steps, right, he's trying to decide does he want to save Cloud, Biggs, or wait for Aerith to wake up. But that's like one of the later scenes for Zack, like right before he joins up with like the Cloud boss fight at the end and shit, right? We've already seen the other choices before that moment. So are we seeing these like out of context, out of order? Because why are we seeing him last trying to decide who's going to save or what he's going to do? If we've already seen those moments. We've already seen him go to the Shinra building. We've already seen him go to Sector 6 reactor with Biggs and shit. So I don't know. We haven't really read the image captions at the bottom of these yet, mostly because they're out of context, and we also don't have the images that go along with them, obviously. But the bottom one is kind of interesting. It says, there is no little stamp shown when Zack awakens in the church after the final battle, therefore it's unclear in which world this scene takes place. Now, why the particular part is interesting to me is that with yesterday's video, we talked about the ending, of course, and we talked about Zack in the church, and I was pretty certain that he was in the main timeline, right, the main world, Beagle world, whatever, because the church looks identical to the remake church in terms of like the stone cross. There's that particular board that goes through the flowers, and there's like the blue tarp shit in the corner. Kind of every other thing that's in the church is similar to remake, right? The thing is, though, in the scene where Aerith gives Cloud the white materia in that other separate world, the church looks very much the same. It's exactly the same with the board and everything, or the board going through there, the tarp thing, the stone cross. So there might be multiple worlds where the church isn't any different, like down to like the minute details, right? Like the church is exactly the same, which is a little underwhelming because like in the chapter 14, when they're doing the little like stroll date thing, they're in like the black and white dog world, the Chihuahua, whatever the fuck the dog is. Like, and if that's still the same world when they're in the church, then that's just another world where the church looks exactly the same, right? We have the remake world, Beagle world, we have that world, and then we have whatever world Zack wakes up in at the end. It's a little underwhelming if they're doing that, where like all the worlds are just exactly the same, like except for like very, very minor details, like the Beagle logo and like certain characters are alive or dead, and that's the only differences. Like that's a little annoying to me and it's a little lazy. But why I bring this up is that in the scene where Aerith gives Cloud the white materia, you can see like the world almost being erased. Like it kind of pans out from that. You see like the pews in the church start to disappear. Just slowing this down really quickly because it makes it a little bit easier to see because the scene does go by kind of quick. This is maybe the black and white dog world. So like, at least this world isn't existing potentially for Zack to wake up in at the end of the game. So he's either waking up in like maybe his Corgi world where he was on the church steps, or maybe just a different world, or maybe he's waking up in the remake Beagle world. I don't know. Obviously, I kind of forgot about the rift in the sky during like the stroll date scene, whatever you want to call it. So clearly this world is doomed. Like that's why you're seeing the rift in the sky. So if the world is disappearing whenever we see like the pews start to disappear in the church, then clearly this shouldn't be the world that Zack wakes up in at the end, because this world should maybe be gone. The FF7 Rebirth Ultimania includes a section dealing with the game's key points and newly arisen mysteries. It spans 4 pages in all. This is the third, which explores the relationship between Rufus and Glenn, as well as their involvement with Wutai. Glenn and Rufus connection. Glenn, an emissary from Wutai, shows up several times in front of Rufus. Reading into their conversations, one can surmise the two used to be friends, but the exact nature of the relationship remains a mystery. Below is a summary of their meaning-laden exchanges. An overview of their involvement with Wutai is depicted in other works in this series. Upon hearing Glenn's name in Junon, Rufus' mind revisits the scene of him shooting down a certain man. Matt and Lucia apparently participated in the mission to attack the Shinra building. Rufus and Glenn's involvement with Wutai. And before Crisis FF7, we learned that Rufus helped fund Avalanche out of their base in Wutai 4 years ago. In the opening cinematic of the first soldier scenario of Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, we see Glenn facing off against Sephiroth, who was dispatched to Wutai 7 years ago. Glenn's comrades in arms, Matt and Lucia, whom together with Glenn, Yuffie introduces as a trio of ex-soldiers in Chapter 7, are name dropped as captains during a flashback featuring Avalanche HQ. So we haven't talked about Glenn Lodbrok being in Rebirth yet, and them name dropping like Matt and Lucia. It's kind of funny. I've talked about this before. There was a certain point before like First Soldier like came out, I believe, where they had said like the characters you see in like the trailers and the cinematics don't matter. They don't have names. They're not important. And I don't remember. I can never reference that quote. I can never like cite the quote. But somewhere along the way that changed, obviously, because we eventually somewhere down the line got names for Glenn, Matt, and Lucia, and obviously now we have the First Soldier ship when it comes to Ever Crisis, and now we have fucking Glenn Lodbrok in the remake project, right? So it's kind of interesting that at some point, somewhere along the way, they were not important, and now he's a prominent character, even if it's not really him. We're going to skip over the character dialogue and just read everything else. Chapter 4, coming face-to-face in Junon's Shinra branch office. Rufus is shocked to see Glenn alive. Glenn responds with a laugh, though his reply sounds facetious. Considering what he says and does later, it's possible these words were no joke at all. Ending, remarking on Viceroy Saruf's failure to show at a press conference, Rufus utters these words as if intimately familiar with Saruf's personal taste. Glenn calls Saruf a rich kid, reminiscent of his line to Rufus and Junon, "You rich kids always did prefer to march to the beat of your own drums." Ending after being shot in the back by Rufus. This line implies that Rufus shot Glenn in the back once before. The scene also reveals that the man we assume to be Glenn is in fact a black robe. Ending revealing his true goal to Rufus. During the scene, Sephiroth's voice and appearance overlap with Glenn's, hinting that all of Glenn's previous behavior was in line with Sephiroth's intentions. So again, this is something that we're kind of blatantly shown in the game, where whenever Glenn gets shot in the back, like he turns into a Sephiroth clone. So it's clear that Sephiroth was taking this form of Glenn to try to like distract Rufus. Specifically, it's supposed to be him like distracting Rufus away from like the Promised Land shit and all that other stuff. Kind of get him, try to get Shinra into war with Wutai, so like they're not bothering what Sephiroth's trying to do. It's essentially what Sephiroth's goals are in Rebirth with that whole situation. Also, the Viceroy Saruf stuff in Japanese. Viceroy Saruf is like blatantly Rufus. It's either that the name is like Rufus backwards, or the name is like an anagram for Rufus, where if you jumble the letters around, you make the word Rufus, right? And it comes to English, Rufus and Saruf are pretty damn close, but there's like a little bit of difference. There's 6 letters in Saruf, only 5 letters in Rufus. There's 2 R's in Saruf, only 1 in Rufus, and there's a U and an A in Saruf when there's 2 U's in Rufus, right? But it's still pretty close, pretty blatant, if you know the lore of FF7. FF7 Rebirth Ultimania includes a section dealing with the game's key points and newly arisen mysteries. It spans 4 pages in all. This is the 4th, which touches on Aerith's fate and the state of Cloud at the end of the game. What was Aerith's fate? What fate awaits Aerith at the Forgotten Capital is one of the game's most anticipated elements. However, it's difficult to say at this point whether she died or is still alive. While Cloud's companions have recognized that Aerith lost her life, Cloud's impression is that she's still alive and well. The scene where Sephiroth takes Aerith's life is not directly depicted and can be interpreted in a variety of ways. Below, we attempted to organize what we know by focusing on the differences between what Cloud and his companions perceive. Cloud utters something as he embraces Aerith's mute body. The scene isn't clearly depicted due to the interference mixed in. Aerith rushes in to join Cloud's battle against Sephiroth. Where she came from and how she got here are still unanswered questions. Before setting off from the Forgotten Capital, Cloud and his companions stop beside what looks to be the spring where Aerith was buried in the original Final Fantasy VII. Scenes illustrate the differences in what Cloud and his companions perceive. Companions' point of view. All party members, aside from Cloud, enter the battle with Jenova Lifeklinger with their limit gauges full due to the rage they're feeling. During the battle with Sephiroth Reborn, Barrett voices the line, "This one's for Aerith." When setting off from the Forgotten Capital, Tifa is unable to see Aerith when Cloud is gazing at her. Cloud's point of view. During the final battle with Sephiroth, Cloud fights alongside Aerith. After the battle, Aerith opens her eyes when Cloud calls out to her. Before boarding the Tiny Bronco in the ending cinematic, Cloud exchanges a few words with Aerith, things only Cloud can see during the ending cinematic. It's unclear at this point in what capacity Aerith is appearing, as a living person, as spirit speaking from the livestream, or an illusion seen only by Cloud. The crack was also seen in the world where Zack survived in the Sector 5 slums where Aerith and Cloud went on a stroll. In those worlds, it was a sign that foreshadowed the end, but what could it mean here? So again, that's not really new information, because we already know that Aerith died. Like, that's clear. We see the blood. We see our group's reaction. Again, the limit break stuff. This is for Aerith. All other shit, it's clear that Aerith died. It's where the Cloud stuff and Aerith is the mystery. Like, what's that exactly? Is it like Aerith from the live stream? Is it a figment of Cloud's imagination? Is it maybe an alive Aerith from a different timeline speaking to Cloud? You have Jenova potentially. Like, there's all those possibilities. Like, that is a mystery still. But for the most part, like, this didn't confirm anything we didn't already know. I do think all those are technically possible. I think two are the most likely. One being Aerith being in the live stream. You know, we've seen that within the compilation before with like Advent Children and stuff, where she can still interact with our group. At the end of FF7, she helps save the world, that sort of thing. So maybe her trying to help Cloud not break mentally, right? Trying to help him from beyond the grave type shit. And the other option is like Cloud not accepting her death and like wanting her to be alive, and because he hasn't broken yet. That's not going to happen until the third game where he accepts her death. And then also like the truth of his past with Zack and things like that, right? It's where he'll truly break, right? I think the latter of the two is the most likely, because our group does perceive Aerith's death. Like, they are mourning her. They're actively pissed off with the Lifeklinger fights because of Sephiroth killing her, right? So she did die. They did see that. So I think it's more likely that Cloud's trying to block out her death. But they could actually both be true. Like, it could be that Cloud's blocking out her death, doesn't want to accept her death, but also that Aerith is in the live stream, but trying to help Cloud from breaking as well. They can both technically be true. If we think about it, there's moments where they could all technically be true. There could be moments where Cloud's just kind of perceiving Aerith and she's not actually there talking to him. There's moments where it could be like live stream Aerith that's talking to him. There's moments where it could be Aerith from a different world talking to him. We see that shit. We see the crossover stuff, right? Where like Zack hops over and starts helping Cloud fight and stuff like that. So that is a possibility. And it could also be possible that there's certain moments where Cloud is talking to like a Jenova depiction of Aerith potentially in his mind, right? Something along those lines. But as it did point out at the bottom of all the shit that we read, there is still the mystery of the rift in the sky at the end of the game that Cloud can see and nobody else can see. He also has the black materia and shit, obviously. I mean, I think it's pretty simple what that could be. It could be just because the black materia, Sephiroth, wants to destroy the world, right? Like, it's just a doomed world as well. Like, all the worlds are technically doomed to be destroyed at some point according to Sephiroth, right? Even the most resilient worlds are doomed to fade or whatever the fuck he says, something along those lines. So obviously, like, the plan is Sephiroth is supposed to get the black materia, some meteor, the world gets destroyed. So that might be just the only reason that it's there in the sky and Cloud can see it. Why Cloud can only see it? I mean, he has obviously close connections with like Aerith, and he was hopping timelines and shit there for a moment. He has close connections with Sephiroth, things like that. That might be why he can perceive it. I do want to say though that if that rift is actually there, like only Cloud can see it, but maybe that rift is legitimately there though, it can insinuate that the world is doomed to be destroyed. It might put the other worlds that we've seen through some of the scenes throughout the game on the same level as Beagle World. Like, they're not just like these kind of false worlds that are kind of temporary or whatever the fuck. Like, if they're doomed to be destroyed in the same way that the Beagle World is, maybe they've been as legitimate as the Beagle World up to a certain point, right? If that makes any sense. Something that I'm kind of stuck on. I just wish they would like explain a little more what these worlds are. Like, I just need to know, are they just like temporary creations by the live stream type shit? Or have they been around for a long ass time? Have there been these other worlds inside the live stream for millions and billions of years, or is this something that was just kind of recently created because of like the ending of Remake type shit, right? Where we like defied fate and destiny. Is that like the branching point where all these worlds were created, or they've always existed? I just need that answered badly. Because at that point we can make a lot more sense of what exactly is going on here. The thing is, we're going to wrap the video up. It's already kind of a thick video, and I feel like we didn't really talk about that much, and we start talking about other shit, other translations. It's going to be like a 30+ minute video. I'd rather keep it a little more compact if I can, around 20 minutes. Probably have daily content for a while here if people just keep doing translations. As long as there's things worth talking about every single day through the translations people are putting out there, there'll be things to talk about. So we'll be back at it again tomorrow. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. There's in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain or leave it like Cobain.